It done it again. There was me waiting for it to happen, and it happened. I wasn't ready for it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. And the reason you're here is because there's nothing on the telly, so you might as well watch this. I've got a great guest coming on this evening, and hopefully I'll have a second guest coming on this evening. Second guest has been in touch to have us struggling at getting in, so we'll cope with it as it happens. Bit like last week, eh? So, good evening, Steph. How you doing? Thank you for joining us this evening. It should be a good evening. It should be a good chat we've got going on tonight. So I'm just making sure that everything's settled down. So, what we got coming up then? Okay, obviously this is Everyday Conversations regarding mental health, coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. Every Tuesday we get the live awesome quiz, and this show, Everyday Conversations regarding mental health, what we're trying to do is take the stigma out of mental health. We're going to talk about mental health in an everyday type of conversation to make people comfortable with it. Tonight we're going to be covering suicide and living with it, or living with the effects of it. It's a tough one. Suicide is becoming something very popular nowadays. People are taking their lives more often nowadays, and there's lots of reasons for it, and we're going to be looking at those. In the coming weeks, we're going to be also we're going to look at children and child suicide, which is becoming very serious at the moment. A lot of it's down to bullying and stuff like that at school. Kids can be quite hurtful, and they can take it quite to heart. So that's what we're going to be looking at in the next few weeks. We've got some guests coming up. We're going to look at obviously different aspects of mental health. So stick with us. We're gonna have this conversation, and hopefully we're going to get the message out there to as many people as possible about mental health. It's okay not to be okay. Everybody in their lives, sooner or later, will have an issue or two. Not complex issues. Some people are just mild, just have a little incident where they're a little bit upset, a little bit depressed, a little bit anxious. Maybe have a little bit of too much of a drink. So there's lots of things that can push people into a little bit of mental health problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my guest. So please welcome Rev, should I say? No, I've done it again. Hang on. Where are we going? Here we go.
Hi, team.
Good evening, Rev. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Now, you're right the other side of the world, aren't you?
I am, yes. I live over in Melbourne, Australia. So, yeah, I'm a long way from you guys, and it is 6 a.m. in the morning here.
Good grief. It's just gone 7 o'clock here. So, in the evening. So we've had our
Right,
day.
okay.
But you're in
Yeah,
tomorrow, aren't
exactly.
you?
I'm in
You're already,
tomorrow, so I'm starting a new one. Yes.
you're already in tomorrow's day, which is
Yes,
great.
ready to go.
I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure how that actually works. Being on the Greenwich Meridian, on the Greenwich Mean Time, we would have been the first day, and then you would have been catching up with us our today is your yesterday. Oh no,
Yeah, you
you're
would think
tomorrow.
so,
Yeah,
but yeah, I think we're ahead of everybody over here.
yeah. Mind you, having said that, I think that you do have some fairly draconian measures. You certainly had more draconian measures than we had during the lockdown, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. We had probably the worst of it, I would imagine. Yeah, two years of 6-month lockdowns in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's in, is that in New South Wales?
That Victoria. Yeah,
Victoria?
I'm in Victoria. Yes,
Yeah, you had the worst of the lot, didn't you? I mean, Queensland
we
had it
did.
fairly easily, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
Up
Even New
north.
South Wales was a lot better than Melbourne. We
Yeah.
had it tough.
And did
Yeah, that wasn't an easy time.
yeah, did the Territories even lock down at all?
I'm
There's
not
nobody
even
up there, is there?
sure. No, no, that's it. Yeah, no. I don't know if they did, to be honest. I think they may have for a little while, but nothing like what we got.
Mm. So, but we've all come through it now. I think we've learned an
Exactly.
awful lot of lessons over the last 3 years, and I, for one, certainly won't be being shut up again. Mind you,
No,
having said
exactly.
that, if they hadn't have shut us up, I wouldn't have been doing this probably.
Right.
This
There
is
you
this
go.
lockdown got me into this malarkey of going live and putting these shows together, and obviously my podcasts. That's how it all started.
Yeah,
But
so
here
there
we
you
are.
go. So there are positives. There are positives out of it. I
There
was the
there is
same.
a
I wrote my
positive to take
books
out.
in ISO. Yeah, so
Yes,
yeah, we took the time to do things we probably wouldn't have done otherwise.
didn't have any choice, did we?
No, true.
There wasn't a lot of choice going on there, that's for sure.
No, that is
So,
very true.
so we're going to talk about your experience, what you've been through. So if you'd like to give us a little bit of background, and then we'll carry on the conversation.
Okay. Um, I'm and Australia, and I grew up here. I had a mother who had severe mental health issues. She had a lot of childhood trauma and affected, the way she parented me and affected her life and the way she raised me. And in my teens, I sort of first became aware that there were some issues there. When I was around 14, she had what she told me was an angina attack, but it turned out it was panic attack that led to panic disorder. And from there, she ended up going into therapy and uncovered some repressed memories, and she'd suffered some sexual abuse as a child. So her mental health deteriorated quite rapidly over the following years. And when I was 22, she took her own life. That had such a major impact on me and my life and the trajectory of how my life went. And I think that in the aftermath of that, and this happened like 23 years ago, so suicide was very like there was such a stigma around it. You didn't talk about it. And I never spoke to anyone about it. I never told anybody that's what had happened to her. So I really sort of disassociated from that and got on with my life. But it had such a major impact on my life later on because it eventually caught up with me, and I ended up having my own mental health issues, and my life in some ways mirrored my mum's. And it was sort of time for me to deal with what had happened and to learn to heal and to learn to speak about it. It because I wanted to sort of stop the generational trauma that was happening in my family. I didn't want it to start then affecting my children. I had a mental breakdown in 2019, and very similar to my mum's in some ways. My children were 14 when it happened, and I was 14 when my mum first had her panic disorder. So I could see that my life was starting to mirror hers, and I wanted to do something about that, and I wanted to make a change. So I've written a memoir about my life's journey, and I wanted to start speaking up about mental health and trying to reduce the stigma that I suffered when it first happened, when my mum first took her life, the stigma around that and not talking about it and not dealing with it. I think I want to speak up to change that and to make it okay for people to speak up about their own mental health and about the way they're feeling. I want to make it okay. Are you still there with me, Tim?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just
I'm not sure what happened to you. I lost you for a bit then.
yeah, no, I was trying to send send a message to the other guest.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't
You
know
were
if I
doing
should keep
so
talking. I wasn't
well.
even sure. I
You were
wasn't
doing
sure if I was
so
even on
well.
the air.
Yeah, yeah, you're going out great. So,
Okay.
23 years ago, it's just, it, I guess at the time, it would have been, you'd have gone through a lot of different emotions. I certainly know when I lost my best mate, I went through a raft of stuff. I mean, I blamed him. Yeah, called him all sorts of names, selfish and for doing it and all the rest of it. And it wasn't until a little time after that you sort of sit down and you're talking to other people about it, and then you can work out. We didn't see it coming. That's the problem. And other friends around didn't see it coming. But he was doing a few bits and pieces out of character, and we sort of pieced it together afterwards. But we still don't know to this day what was going on. But we think that one of the issues might have been that he may have been diagnosed with a cancer, and having seen my wife go through cancer the first time, I think that shook him up a lot. And then my wife got cancer for a second time after David taken his own life, and she died a year and a day after he did, and that was another shocker.
Yeah, that would have been so tough.
So the cancer came back a second time after sort of a year and 11 months, and it came back far more aggressive than the first time. They said after the first time, if she's clear for 2 years, she'll be fine. A year and 11 months, and she wasn't.
Wow. Yeah, that's so tough.
But when somebody takes their own life, they leave so much pain behind. You know, when I don't know, you remember the mass theme, um, "Suicide is painless." Well, it's not. Not certainly
No,
not for the people that's left behind.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think
So,
like what
what
you were saying,
range of
I was,
emotions did you go through then?
yeah, I was just going to say I was just absolutely traumatized. And I think because I'd spent so many years trying to support her because she did have suicidal ideation for quite a few years and she'd had many attempts, but she'd always managed to get through that. She would sort of go and do something and then ring for help. So we were sort of conditioned to think that she would just always survive, and this was just the way it was. So I was very much in trying to save her mode. And so my life consisted of pretty much just keeping her alive. So when she finally succeeded, I was just absolutely traumatized. And the year after, I was like you, I just felt such a range of emotions. Like you go through grief and anger and guilt and then sadness and it's just like this absolute roller
Mm,
coaster. One day after the other, you feel guilt for even feeling like you're relieved, and then you've got so much anger, and then you're just absolutely devastated because of the loss. So you just go through so much, and it's really hard because you just have so many unanswered questions. Like you just
mm,
have, you just keep going over and over and over in your head, like why and what was it this time and all that sort of stuff. So I think it just makes it so hard to deal with and so hard to cope. And I used anger, I think, to cope with it. I got angry with her, and about a year after her death, I said, "I'm not going to end up like she is." And I think I got angry with her, and I said, I think it was the abandonment, the fact that she'd left me, and I just said, "I'm not." I got angry, and it took me 20 years to get to the point where I could release that anger and finally have compassion and find that compassion. Like you were saying, it takes a while. It took me
Yeah.
such a long time. But, I finally did get there. I think you've got to get to that point where you can finally open up and realize, hey, like she really suffered in life. She tried so hard to make it. Like, I'm proud of her. She put in so much effort to try and stay alive, but it was just, in the end, nothing worked for her. So
Yeah.
I think I just feel a lot of compassion now for her. And I just love her for what she tried to do.
Mm.
And I think that's helped a lot. But yeah, like you were saying, that year afterwards, and for me,
Yeah.
even 19 years, like, those emotions that you go through are just all consuming. It's really difficult.
Yeah. At times you blame yourself. Is there anything you could have done? Was it your fault? Um, and
Exactly.
that's the
Yes.
difficult part. It's dealing with it, and especially if you've got like Dave left two boys, his sons. I mean, unfortunately, I mean it's a horrible story, but they were in the house when he did it, which is a real shocker. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a real horror show, complete. And I think coming through that and dealing with it and that roller coaster of emotions of blame and anger and disappointment, and I think and that was the first attempt, and I think people that are serious about suicide, you generally don't know who they are and when they're going to do it and how they're going to do it until they've done it. And
Yeah, exactly.
and,
Yeah.
and the determined person that's going to take their own life are going to be successful the first time.
Yes.
Generally, the
Yeah.
people that are unsuccessful at it, it's normally a cry for help.
Yeah.
Um,
And I have a
and
feeling my mum sort of fell into that category where I don't think, even in this last time, that it was a serious attempt. I think that her mobile phone battery died, and there was, things that happened that ended up
mm,
sort of, making it be successful. But I think you're right. I think that a lot of times there is no indication, and it's just final, and that's really tough to deal with. And like you said,
yeah,
you hope that you can, I wish I could have done more. Or, like, I know for me, I just wished that I just would have been with her 24/7 if I had have known. So you have all these crazy thoughts go through your head, but the reality is, I think that you can't change the outcome. Even if you think that you could have done more, you probably couldn't. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's
it's difficult.
so difficult at the time. Um, with 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 just dealing with it on a personal level. It's just coming to terms with what's happened and trying to piece together why. And those questions will probably never ever be answered. And it's so it does have an effect on everybody around. Um, Certainly, Roe has gone for the mill on it. In fact, she was arrested and taken into police custody, and she was in police custody for 36 hours. The kids have been taken away, and they were actually, fortunately, um, Dave's sister looked after them for that period of time. And we got down there the following day when she came out, and it was terrible. I mean, trying to that whole raft of emotional stuff that was going on, the anger, the finger pointing, the everything was
Mhm.
just just hard. Um,
Yeah, and the ramifications of it are just, so
yeah.
large, and you just never know. I know even my daughter, when I first told her, I didn't tell my children for a long time, until they're old enough and in their teens. But when I told
Mm.
her, she'd never met her grandmother, but she grieved. the
Yeah.
woman that she never got to meet. So, the ramifications of it, last generations.
Yeah. Well, the youngest son, he was only, I think he was 8 at the time, um,
Wow.
and he'd been blaming himself for all these years that it was his fault somehow that his dad had gone and done it. And it's only the last couple of years that we he's opened up and talked about it, and we've cleared the air, and it really wasn't anything to do with him at all. But
I
he's been
think it's
carrying that guilt
children.
all that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think children do take that on, because they don't know any differently. I know that when my mum's mental health was bad, and as a child, I often thought it was my fault. Like, and
Mm,
because we don't know any different, we can only go by what's in front of us, and
yeah,
we take that on as a child. So yeah, it is important that, through therapy or whatever, that we work out that it's not our fault and there isn't anything we could have done.
yeah. It's hard on everybody around that. I mean, it's really really difficult losing a parent at the best of times, and dealing with that. But to lose a parent that way is I guess harder to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, it's
Not
really tough.
yeah,
Yeah. I think even like for me, it's that abandonment. Like, how could my mother leave me? And I had to come to terms. It took such a long time coming to terms with that and
yeah,
separating that hurt and that abandonment from the reality, which was that I think she would have stayed if she could have, and if she felt that that was, something that she was able to do, which she wasn't. Like, I had to sort of separate that emotion from her, what
yeah,
she was thinking. And I think a lot of the times, they think that we're going to be better off. They don't see it the way we do. So
no,
you've got to kind of separate that hurt and emotion from, and have compassion for what they were thinking. And I think that's helped me in my healing, is separating that. But it is
yeah,
so difficult as a child, just trying to work that out. Because this is, it was my mom, and you were saying that their dad, like,
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to understand how they could do that, but it, yeah, I get it now, and I think that's been huge healing for me.
yeah. And as you've gone over the years, I mean, you said that you had problems yourself. Were they similar to your mother's?
In some ways, I didn't have the childhood trauma, so I wasn't dealing with what she was dealing with. But I think just me not dealing with what happened, and a year after her death, I just got on with life, and I said, I'm not going to be like her. I'm never going to have mental health issues. I'm going to live a positive life. And I just, like, disassociated from what happened. So I think that didn't serve me. And then I met my amazing husband, and we traveled the world, and so we set up this amazing life for ourselves. But when I had my own children, they had, some health issues, and we had our own business, which was very stressful. So as the stress, came in our lives, I think that it caught up with me, and then I started having my own mental health issues because I hadn't dealt with the trauma of losing her. So I think that's when I started to have, depression and anxiety, and the anxiety just got so great. The more I ran kind of from my feelings, and the more I didn't deal with it, the anxiety got to a point where I ended up having, a panic disorder episode that lasted 48 hours. And that was very similar to what my mum had had. So, it was at that point that where I realized I really need to start, dealing with what happened, and looking at the way I coped and the way I dealt with things. And that was a big turning point for me.
So how did you go around getting that sorted out in your own head, or did you get
Um,
help? Or
I did, yeah. I got help at that point. I started seeing a psychologist, and I started things that that she recommended to me. For instance, I sort of got out of that survival mode where I just kept going, and didn't look back. That wasn't serving me anymore. So I, got into, meditation. and started to just slow down and took on a lot less. And I think through sort of the psychology and working through the past and everything that had happened, as well as the meditation, which allowed me to just ground myself a lot more, I've started to I've started to sort of come out the other side and had some big realizations about my mum and my life, and how my journey sort of mirrored hers, and also how I wanted to be a different mum and be more present with my children. And I think that the therapy and the meditation has made a huge difference.
So you've got yourself squared away. What about your children? I mean, were they had you had the children by then, or had you they came along after?
No, I'd had my children. They're now, I've got twins. They're in their late teens, and I've got a 13-year-old as well. So they were sort of in their primary school years when my mental
Mm.
health deteriorated. They, my youngest has also had anxiety as well. So I think that it's kind of like the generational trauma has sort of kept going. And I think that was one of my biggest motivations in healing, is that I didn't want it to affect my children. And I think that, in doing that, then, I'm going to be the one that's going to be able to break that cycle for my children.
Mm.
And just the way I parent now is a lot different. And I think that's made a huge difference to her mental health as well.
Yeah. Are you able to speak about it openly in the family?
Yes, absolutely. Now I am. Well, I didn't
Mm.
tell my children for a long time because I did want to protect them, but I think as part of my healing is now, like, I speak so openly about it, and I've spoken to them about it. I've written the book about it. They haven't read it yet, but I do hope that one day they, that's always going to be there for them to read when they're ready. They've
Yeah.
read their parts of the book, but they haven't read the whole book. But yeah, I'm very open with them now about everything, and I think that has helped a lot as well.
And what about your husband? Is he happy talking about it as well with you? Has he been
Yeah,
supportive in that
absolutely.
way?
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, was very blessed to have met him, and he's extremely supportive and very open. And yeah, we speak about, and I think that's the way to go, because I think for a long time I didn't speak about it to friends. I didn't talk about it to anyone, and I think that, that's, I've completely changed in that way. I'm so open about my mental health. I'm very, like, even now, if I get a bit of anxiety, like, I'll just be open and upfront about it and let him know, hey, I'm feeling this. And, so I think just being able to have that openness has really helped my healing as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that it's the other people that are around at the time just find it so difficult to talk about. Um, they kind of treat you like a leper, or if they do come up, they're awkward. They don't know what to say, or how to
Exactly.
approach any of the subjects around it. I don't know if you've found that with people that are close to you at the time.
Definitely. And I think that, even 23 years ago, that was probably even worse then. Like, no one knows what to say. I mean, even to just someone that's grieving a
Yeah,
normal death, that, no, people don't know how to talk about it. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to speak up, is I wanted to, to make it easier for people, and just to be more open, and to show it
yeah,
doesn't matter what you say. Um, we're still just people. We just need people to be more open and understanding, I think.
yeah.
And the more we speak up, I think the more that will change.
Absolutely. What I'm seeing is that people nowadays tend to have, instead of going to a funeral, they go to a celebration of somebody's life. And I think by doing
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
that is
Love that.
changing the mindset as well. I mean, funerals used to be a real dreary affair, and everybody sort of struggles with it. I mean, people still do. I mean, at funerals, but afterwards, we have a wake, and then you can reflect back on a person's life, and and celebrate the life that they've had, rather than mourn the loss. And I think nowadays that's becoming more and more prevalent. Certainly from when I've over the last few years, I've lost a lot of mates that I've served with, and I think one year I did 20 funerals of
Oh,
mates that we'd lost
wow.
along the way, and they're all fairly different, but they all had one key aspect, that it was a celebration of their life. And afterwards,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
wake, it was like a reunion, really, just to see who's left more than anything else.
Oh,
So, so from that point of view, it's I think if you can look at it that way, is celebrate the life rather than the loss.
yes, definitely. And I
I
think
think
that's changing, isn't it? Yeah.
that's a good way of helping people through it. Uh, the grieving process is there, the bereavement's there, but it's the ability to be able to talk about it. I think that is one of the biggest helps. So we've covered bereavement quite a lot on this show. Quite a lot of guests coming in talking about their process. In fact, my sister lost her husband back in January, and she came on a couple of weeks after she'd lost him. And I had some friends on. Lost my best mate last summer. Hottest day of the year in the UK. He's up on his roof, two-story house, washing off his solar panels, and fell off. So the fall didn't kill him. It was hitting the ground that did.
Oh, wow.
But they've come on the show a few times to tell their stories over the last sort of 6, 8, 9 months, and they were able to give a hope.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also remembering the good times, not just
Yeah.
the grief. And I think that helps a lot. And I know for me that I sort of had this amnesia about the good times. I just completely
Mm.
forgot that we had great times and that we were close and that, you know, we were loved. And I think that part of the journey to healing for me was remembering, you know, the good times and the love that she had for me,
Yeah.
and that's helped a lot with my grieving as well. So it's not, you know, when you were saying with the funerals now they're more celebrations of life. It's a great way to do it, because then it's a lot easier
Mm.
to remember the good times. So through your hurt and through the pain, you remember, and you keep the
Yeah.
sort of you keep the spirit alive because through those good times.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things um, that we're starting to do a lot better is to bring joy to a funeral a funeral, rather than sort of being morbid. It's remembering the real fun times, and giving people a bit of a laugh at the funeral. I think that
Yeah,
helps
definitely.
break the ice, and then afterwards being able to talk to people about that person and making it really comfortable, um, to show people that they don't have to pussyfoot around. They can come and chat about that person. And
Yes.
I think it's probably a little bit more difficult after a suicide, to be able to talk about the person. People really find that still quite uncomfortable to talk about. But I think by talking about it, we destigmatise it, and that's really important. That it's it doesn't matter how a person has died, whether they died through an illness, an accident, or taken their own life. There's a reason why it's happened, um, and you can sort of blame God or whoever, but when somebody's number's up, it's up. And I think if you look at it that way, then sometimes it's an easier way of dealing with it. When it's
Yeah,
somebody's time, it's their
definitely.
time, and it doesn't
Yep.
matter how they go, to celebrate that life that's lost, um, is a good thing, because
Yeah,
we've
definitely.
all got the same ticket. Sooner or later,
Yes.
your number's going to come up. Uh,
It is, and it's just a matter of when, isn't it?
yeah, and for too
Yeah,
long, people have
definitely.
found it really difficult to talk about, and it shouldn't be. It
I
should
know,
be one of
and
the
I think
easiest
it's
things to talk about because we're all going to go
yeah.
that way.
It's all yeah, we all have to we will all have to face it at some point. And I think
Yeah,
it's because people avoid the uncomfortable, don't they? People don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations, so they avoid them. But I know that that would have helped a lot for me to be able to talk about it at the time. But that was not done in society at that time. You didn't
no,
speak about it. There was that shame associated with it. But I do believe that is changing, and I think the more we speak about it, the more that will change.
yeah, and I think if you look at the figures nowadays, I mean, of suicides, they're becoming a lot more. I think the latest figures I saw, there's roughly around about 86 veterans taking their life every year at the moment in the UK.
Wow.
I
Okay.
mean
Yeah.
that's a lot. I mean that's
Yeah.
one every week or more than every week. I mean
More
it's
exactly.
yeah a couple of week almost, which is not on. I mean we should be doing a lot more, and it's just letting people know that there is somebody out there that will listen. And this is
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
something that we've been pushing is that if you know somebody's struggling, and you make sure that you've got the time, if you're going to approach somebody and say, "Are you all right? Are you really all right?" and they start opening up, then you have to give them the time to open up to you, and not to
Yeah.
sort of mug them off
Definitely.
because you can do irreparable damage by sort of getting somebody to open up and then I've got to go and feed the chickens or whatever. You go and do some trivial task and mug them off because that can have a detrimental effect. And I
Yeah.
think
Definitely.
it's letting people know that there are people out there to listen, and sometimes that's all it takes is somebody just to sit and listen to somebody's problem, and a problem
Yeah.
shared is a problem
That's it.
halved. So
Yeah. Definitely. And I think that the problem is too that when people, are in that state, they do believe that people don't care, and I think that
yeah,
that's not the truth. We people care. It's just they've got to reach out, and that's the hardest thing. And I think sometimes it's impossible for them. So the people around them do need to sort of, look out for the people around them and look out and see if they can see the signs
yeah.
and reach out and try and talk to people, because I think that when you're in that state, you're not necessarily going to be able to reach out. So it is
Yeah,
being
I
aware
think
of people that are around you and the way they're feeling.
yeah, it's funny. You can quite often the person that's going to cry for help before doing anything silly. You'll recognise in them that they're not themselves. They look a little bit depressed. They look a bit anxious. They look at that they come across withdrawn. They've been insular. They're the people that we can help. The person
Yes.
that's determined to do it, you're very rarely going to identify them until they've done it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But it's those people that are in the early stages of doing something silly that you can help. And all it takes is just to sit and give them a hug, put your arm around them, and listen. And I
Yeah. That's
think if
it.
we can do that for people, then we can start helping save a lot of lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is. It's not about offering solutions. It is just about listening, isn't it? And just
Yeah,
showing them that you're there for them, regardless, and
yeah,
making it okay. Yeah, making it okay for them.
yeah. So it's certainly okay not to be okay nowadays. Years ago, it wasn't. Years ago, we
Yeah,
didn't talk about
definitely.
it. Um, and I don't know how the figures. I haven't really looked at figures from way back, but what they have started doing in this country over the last couple of years is the coroners are now recording veterans that have taken their own lives. Before it was just in service, and there's quite a few of those in service that have been taking their own
Okay.
lives. But they've now started recording whether a person was a veteran. So we're starting to see some fairly large figures coming out, and they're certainly on par, if not probably more so than farmers. Farmers tend to be another big area of suicides in this
Wow.
country.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that's the same across the rest of the world in the farming community, because quite often farmers are out on their own all the time. That they getting stitched up after time by the big supermarkets,
Yeah.
and
It's not it's a
depressing.
difficult
Yeah, it's a
field. Yeah.
funny
And
old
then
game
you've
to
got
be in.
droughts and all sorts of things that then affect
Yeah, severe weather. I mean,
severe weather.
the
Exactly.
the UK's just been hit by a cold freeze, and we just had snow in the last couple of days, so that's going to have an effect. The other year we had, I think it was about 6 or 8 weeks of constant rainfall, um, and that has an effect on getting crops in or getting crops out. So I don't know whether you've seen it in Australia, but apparently we're struggling at finding tomatoes in the supermarkets at the moment, because the growers have had trouble um, growing tomatoes at this time of the year.
Oh, wow. No, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that here, but we had potato chips shortage not too long ago. So there are, things like
Mm.
that are starting to happen where there's a shortage of things. And yeah, I think in Australia, we have bushfires and droughts and
Yeah.
all sorts of things that affect the crops. And yeah, so there's a lot going on here as well.
Yeah. So we've got chicken flu knocking around at the moment. Um,
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
there's a struggling at producing enough chicken. So
Oh, wow.
bird
Okay.
flu, bird flu they're calling it at the moment. So yeah, all of that's happening.
Yeah, there is a lot of going on that puts a lot of pressure on people.
Yeah, and that has an effect on the farming community. Um,
Yes, definitely.
and
And I
they
think
certainly
it's
have
just
had the means to do it as well. Um, most farmers have shotguns knocking around the place, and that's a quick, easy method of doing it. So
wow. Yeah, it's really sad. It would be very isolating job.
yeah, but there you go. I'm sure that by us talking about it, and letting other people know that it's okay to talk about it, then the more people we can get to talk about it, the less of a problem that hopefully it will become.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I decided to write my book and start speaking
Mm,
up about my journey is the hope that in doing that, it makes it okay for others to do that as well. I really just want to sort of break that stigma and say it's okay to say that we have mental health issues and that we need help. It's okay to reach out and to be open about it. And I really want to make that okay for people.
mm. So where can people get your book?
It's released on March 14th, so in 4 days' time.
Ooh,
And I'm on Instagram. I've got an Instagram account called Days of My Life by Rev. So if they're interested, they can go over to Instagram and check me out. And on March 14th, I'll have the links on how to purchase that.
brilliant. So if you can send those to me, I'll put them in the show notes after.
Okay, beautiful. I'll send that through afterwards.
Well, Rev, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much for having me on, and it's been so nice to be able to speak so openly with you and to have such important discussions around mental health and suicide. And yeah, it's been an absolute honor being here.
no, it's my pleasure. So if you want to hang about for a minute or two after, we'll have a wash up.
All right, beautiful. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Tim.
No, you're most welcome. So there you go. That's this week's show done. Hope you've got something from it. Hope you've are now able to go and approach anybody that you think that's not okay in themselves and have that chat. And if you have that, if you do that, make sure you've got the time to sit and listen. So until next week then, what we've got coming up next week? Next week I've got another show for you. I've got some guests coming on next week, and we'll continue the conversation. So until next week, for everyday conversations regarding mental health. Or if you want to come and join me over on the live awesome quiz channel on a Tuesday at 8 o'clock, I've got another quiz. We're going to do an early Mother's Day quiz. So it's all to do with mothers next week. So that'll be fun. The old Duchess has been hard at work putting that one together, and it's ready to go. It's in the can, as they say. So until next week, TTFN, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you soon.